Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the RP Spotlight. It's Sam again with a very special guest, Xentherida, or Zen as he's affectionately known in the community. Zen, how are you?
I'm all right. How about you?
Oh, doing fantastic.
Lovely.
So you've been in this community quite a long time,
Yeah,
if I understand correctly.
I officially joined TNP on the 28th of February 2015. I've been here for over 6 years, which is a bit terrifying.
It could be worse.
Could be worse.
Could be worse. So how did you first come to nation states and then to TNP?
So again, my story probably starts a lot like how most people start. They were looking for a nation building simulation. I already at the time was kind of familiar with creative writing, but I didn't actually get into the North Pacific until about 4 months after I actually joined. I originally joined nation states in December 2014. I was born into the region of the West Pacific, and then I moved to a region called Australia because I am Australian. I thought, oh, nice, everyone's Australian here, cool. And then it was very boring and nothing happened ever. So I thought, if I want to do role playing, because I'd done a bit of role playing as well on the Nation States forum. Like, if I want to do some role play, what's the most active region? The North Pacific. They have role play. Cool, good. And then I got myself set up. I did some very bad starting RPs, but otherwise it was quite nice.
What do you mean bad starting RPs? You can't just say that and expect us not to ask.
Well, I'll say my starting role play. The first issue was I was very new to actually image editing myself on a map. So when I actually put my nation down on the map, I also managed to stretch it, and that completely ruined it if lore was going to put it onto the map. And then I did that a couple times, and then I think I eventually got on without actually managing to ruin it completely. Then it would have been Mad Jack at the time as well, who at the time I think was called Nierr, Nierr. And then my first role play was actually me realizing my land is shit. It needs to be bigger. So I role played an expansion, and it was pretty bad. And none of it is canon. Mostly because I also kept breaking character all the time and kept saying to a very old RP called Nebula, we did a port swap, which was very, very strange. I don't know why we quite did that. It's kind of just an impulse thing. Kept breaking character. Everything about it was just bad. Nothing of it ever stands in canon, but otherwise pretty good.
Well, I think everyone starts off a little rough from my understanding and chatting to other people.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about both Xentherida and Dutrieka, because Dutrieka, for anyone who is not aware, is your secondary nation on the Eris roleplay.
Yeah, I'm going to start with Dutrieka. So Dutrieka is basically an analogy to the Yugoslav wars, essentially. And currently, right now, it is analogous to the Yugoslav wars. I do love history, especially more recent military things. So anything World War II on, hell, even anything Victorian era onwards, I find pretty fascinating. So as a thing that I've wanted to do is I've always loved the aesthetic of the Yugoslav wars, basically how brothers disintegrated. A nation that was held so long together through brotherhood and unity, and as soon as the main lead, that would be Tito, as soon as he starts cracking and he dies, the whole union just splinters just like that. So that would have been, but that would have been the idea mostly. But I did also want to kind of stay away from the ethnic conflict and genocide, because that is not very well. It wouldn't go well with the community. It wouldn't go well with me, because I don't think I would be the right person to role play it anyway. And I'd rather have an analogy for that without the brutality that is for no reason. So I've instead connected it to Andren, who we were historically a long part of connected religiously, and then they disintegrated over reasons quite unknown, really. But nowadays they've started another conflict with Andren. The official line is Dutriekan terrorists managed to shoot up an Andrenian hospital. No, not a hospital. Sorry, their parliament, and killed quite a lot. They were all the terrorists were killed in the process, but doing so basically started the spark. And then, after a very awful letter being addressed to the remnants of the Andren Parliament, which was very nastily put, there was an Andren build-up on the border. And at the time, fighter jets were flying, and one was a bit too close to the border and was shot down by a Deuterekan SAM battery. And that was the official motive. That was the real thing that kicked it into war right there. So right now they're getting fucked. The other nation I have, I'll go with Xentherida now. So the other nation I have is Xentherida, which is one of I'm gonna use this to blow my own horn. It's probably one of the oldest Nordic nations. So I'm original, and you're all copying me, nerds. But that was one of the original nations, and it wasn't actually that Swedish to begin with. It was very weird. It was kind of just more English, more very English sounding than actually Swedish, despite my intentions. And it took a good few years for me to actually like rework it and establish things as actually fitting in within a genuine Nordic theme. So right now, the biggest thing that's happened is probably the Eris Geneva Conventions. So we've worked with Saintonge to draft protections of civilians. That would be the the Science Convention, and protection of prisoners of war, which is the Savatenstad Convention. And then there's additional things about arms control. So that's probably the biggest thing that's happened, at least with the things. So yeah.
Yeah, and that has proven a bit of a divisive issue in the community, but for the most part, a lot of people seem to be on board with it.
Yeah,
I think
wait, go ahead, sir.
I think you and Kyle have brought it more into line of the Geneva Convention is an actual set of laws instead of a to-do list for us.
Just, it's the Savatenstad Convention, not the Savatenstad Suggestion. But a lot of the issues, it's even better, honestly, if people like have legitimate in-character issues as to why they're not signing. It should definitely be focused on the in-character things, and don't say, well, we're not signing because it infringes. Well, we don't trust the other sides to keep it, or there's no punishment. You should have that as an in-character. This is my perspective. You should have it as an in-character thing, because roleplay is way more interesting than solving it out of character.
So yeah, sorry I cut you off while you were talking about Xentherida. That's fine. Let's kind of go back to that here.
Oh, sorry. Do I need to repeat myself in that case?
No, that's all right.
Okay, cool. All right.
Just hoping you go on a little more about the nation, and like how you what inspired Xentherida.
This is I kind of Xentherida originally was meant to be very much a sort of how I saw a Nordic sort of nation, but scaled up into something with the power of a large Western European country. So something that actually had those values and that culture, but scaled up to have an actual decent impression on the global sphere. This is 2015 roleplay I'm talking about. So things are not cohesive, and there was a lot of dick waving, I guess you can say, if you pardon my language. There was, yeah. So it was kind of like trying to put up a big utopian nation, and now I've started to actually introduce issues into it. But the idea was, when it came in, was a big utopian, peaceful utopia, really, if I'm just going to repeat myself. But that was kind of the original. But for the issues now that I'm doing I'm trying to actually get something systemic. So, for example, we have a very small military in comparison to Eris standards. We're trying to basically enforce peace across. We have a massive aging crisis as well. So unemployment is low, and that means there's not a really good reserve of workers, essentially. And many places are going having to forcibly research into automation, which is expensive as hell. So, yay. But yeah, that's essentially how I saw it as a thing, a sort of Nordic nation scaled up. And I still kind of do hold myself to that. I have a centre-left government, high welfare state. It's quite a nice country to live in, I'd say. But again, it is still based from a time in roleplay where issues were kind of avoided instead of balancing. So thank you, Vathia, for the based. Yeah.
Oh. So with that, I'm guessing that your overall political structure was also very heavily Nordic inspired.
That is correct. Yes. So we do have a very strong welfare state. We have the government spending is quite high. So I'd imagine taxation is incredibly high and definitely skewed towards the richer percentage of the population, and also businesses as well. So I'd imagine things like setting up a business in Xentherida is decently difficult because you have to go through a lot of regulations, a lot of taxation, and it's gonna be a bit of a pain to say. We do have a monarchy, in fact, but unfortunately, I haven't actually fleshed out quite a lot of my history, despite my time. I am definitely more of a numbers person. The numbers, Mason, what do they mean? But it does have a monarchy, which I haven't really done much about. It was originally meant to be, while technically politically neutral, it was meant to be politically involved, at least. So for some reason, I had them very originally as the king was the speaker in the parliament, which was a bit strange, to be honest. You shouldn't really technically have a very politically involved monarchy, in my personal opinion. But it was still interesting, I guess. There's the family. Not many of them left, though. Oh, this would be a crucial detail. Xentherida is actually primarily matriarchal. It's instead of historically, I wanted to sort of see how things would play out as pretty much the roles are flipped in Xentherida. So the whole thing originally came out, oh, women can give birth, so if they can create life, they're way better, and kind of ignored everything from there. That's how Xentheridan logic kind of worked. That was at least historically how it was meant to be, and they were seen as superior because they could have a kid, which is, I mean, it's a very impressive thing to do. But yeah, so and it is a bit sketchy, a lot of my stuff, because I haven't fleshed out things properly. The amount of detail people have gone into. I mean, I can answer that right now. So I'll give an example in terms of the monarchy. So historically, it is basically like modern real life, but essentially flipped. So there was matriarchal. Oh God, what is it? What's the word for preference when, if, say, for example, the monarch goes to the eldest son instead of the eldest child? Someone can get that word. Primogeniture, there it is. So there's female primogeniture. So we've had almost entirely queens. I think very rarely, I think I've put it as the first time ever, back in 2016, we had our first simultaneous king and male prime minister. Politically, it's dominated by the female, by women. Societal is a bit more complicated, and I wanted to have an idea where the East and West have a sort of separate view on the role of women as a dominating stance within the household. So I think the East of Xentherida wanted to have it as women are the ones who go out and work and earn a wage, and men stay at home and take care of the house, essentially. And then the East views it as the men need to go out and work because the women need to be able to organize everything from the house. But of course, with modern economies, essentially, everyone's working because no one can afford just to have one person in the household sitting doing nothing, essentially, and not financially contributing. So that's how I essentially wanted to see Xentherida function. And that was going to play into how I was kind of building history before I went on a hiatus because I was starting university. So, yeah. I'm about to bloody talk myself red in the face, just going on and on. I need a second to breathe.
That's perfectly all right. So, with that,
Hmm.
what's the kind of the structure of the Xantharian government?
Mess? Does that count? um, again, because I am not terrifically original when it comes to structuring things. It is very much based on. I think I'm going to go with. I'm going to basically state this as how I wanted to do it in the rework. So the reason for Xentherida being a grand federation in name is historically I wanted something probably in the early 1200s. I was considering. I think it was 10 to 11 to 1200, something along early second millennia. Yeah, the second millennia. Um, there there were two nations who have a what do they do? Two nations essentially who are united in a personal union, effectively, and because they managed to do that probably after decades of warring, the fact that oh my goodness, what is that? The fact that they managed to unite and actually cooperate, they managed to create essentially a grand federation. I haven't actually thought of as to who was each nation. I was halfway through doing that, and then I kind of had to prep for university. So a lot of this kind of did get thrown to the wind. I do have it possibly somewhere in this Discord that I was thinking of that I might actually do some history, but no, not right now. I don't have that, unfortunately. But yeah, that was how it would work as a federation, essentially. And it would be two prime ministers, two main leaders for each. One would essentially operate as a head of government and the other as a head of state, effectively. And the monarchy would operate not even within that. They would not even be figurehead role. They would just be a family, kind of, that the tabloid obsesses over even. And they would essentially be doing switches between one being one actually having executive power, the other one not. Each of these two places have their own parliaments. They're basically fractured in half. But overall, despite them operating almost entirely independently of each other, they still are basically sealed with a bit of concrete at the top to form one solid place. This is always, again, currently it is still operating as an entirely unitary state. So everyone is in the same sort of place. They're all in one country and government. So yeah, that's how I was seeing things as well. I actually do need to write this stuff down now, otherwise I'm going to completely forget it.
So we've gone over kind of the inspiration, the government system.
Mm-hmm.
What
Fred, stop. Yes.
You know what? We're going to ask that question actually. If
Fred knows exactly what he's baiting me into.
Have any Xentharidan heads of government died in office or become incapacitated?
Yes, one of them did, whose name I changed to be something incredibly different. They, the prime minister before my current one, who's Leona Antonsen, whose name is I think Harem Blomfeld. They collapsed in Parliament. I think this was about 2018, I believe. They collapsed in Parliament and they were diagnosed with a brain tumor. So they effectively rendered incapacitated. So they had to have the deputy prime minister, who would have been Leona Antonsen. She would have come in, and then they would have, and they would have had to do a snap election, and then she would be president, and then prime minister even, and then that would solve effectively how how she is established as a legitimate head of parliament. Head of state. Interesting that, yeah. Yeah, so that's essentially how I wanted it to work. And Pred knows exactly what the original name of that monarch, of that prime minister was, and exactly why it was so ridiculous that they just got brain cancer. So again, this is Pred knows that. Xentherida's etymology, I believe. I'm kind of skipping questions here. Actually, yeah. Do you want to be the one who asks the question because that's how it's meant to work?
Yes, please.
Yeah,
That's
there
why
you
I'm here.
go. Yeah.
So
Sorry.
we'll actually start with a question about your monarchy from Robespierre here.
Mhm.
So he says it's interesting that the monarch of Xentherida doesn't carry a figurehead role as the nation's head of state. Do they or their family still retain any ceremonial duties despite not being the head of state, or have any historical importance in modern practice? And are they revered or admired among the general populace?
So the to see it is they are basically glorified ambassadors. They're not. They are kind of figureheads, but they don't have even ceremonial power. They are kind of just there to hi tourists, come see our lovely castles. The castles are lovely. Look at them, and then that would be about it. They were effectively meant to work as glorified. I want to say figurehead, um, but I can't find the word. Sort of like a representation of it. I guess figurehead works, but I'm kind of very confused. But they are kind of they are seen as important. They are kind of revered, but they're not really like seen as like gods or even like a status of the British, um, the British monarchy. They're kind of just effectively just like another minister or ambassador, to be honest. That's how I want to see it. And then obviously they're used everywhere on the tourism adverts. So, so yeah.
So, and here's a question from Pax. What is Xentherida's etymology? It doesn't sound classically Nordic, so I was wondering if you had an explanation for it.
So the explanation for it is Xentherida is supposed to be the way you translate it into Mercanti. So, for example, Deutschland is a German name, but of course in German it's in English it's called Germany. So the original idea I wanted for it was the unification under the. So I actually need to define this word, so I'm not using it wrong. The unification under which the two states of Xentherida, the two original states were united, was occurred underneath the underneath a supernova that occurred pretty much directly above to basically right above where it was. So at the same time as they unified, there was a supernova occurring at the zenith. Zenith. Exactly, that is the word. At the zenith of the night sky, at the exact time and place and time, they managed to observe a supernova at the zenith, and then it came from there, Xentherida. And then I was planning on working it onto something of land of, but I didn't ever get to the suffix, unfortunately. So again, you can see how completely disjointed everything I do is.
It all comes together in time.
Eventually, yeah.
So here's some more inside joke sounding questions from Pred. Have any Xentheridan heads of government consumed non-pharmaceutical drugs?
Yes.
And what non-pharmaceutical drugs are legal in Xentherida?
I think Pax could probably guess exactly what non-pharmaceutical drugs. Okay, so this is meant to be a thing. The Xentheridan Prime Minister, before he was officially diagnosed. No, look at the emoji. What's that emoji? The emoji you presented, Pax, is literally it. Before he was officially diagnosed with the brain tumor, the Xentheridan Prime Minister had minor but chronic head pain. So they self-diagnosed with cannabis because it was fine. So yeah, also non-pharmaceutical drugs are illegal. Effectively, all of them. This is going to sound a bit strange. It is drug problems. Well, considering cannabis has taken an important status in Xentherida for literally millennia at this point, it's already culturally in a thing. Obviously, you're not going to have it if you're too young. It's forbidden to those, I believe, under 21. They're all decriminalized, and it's not. You don't get imprisoned for possessing them, and and drug possession and drug addiction is seen as a health crisis as opposed to a crime sort of thing. So instead of arresting people for consuming any drug, if they're found to be addicted to it, they're taken to a rehabilitation clinic, and they are effectively weaned off the drug, all free of charge as well. So it is basically to address it as a health crisis. And I believe I did include tobacco within those drugs, essentially, because tobacco really kills a lot of people, which is kind of an obvious statement there. I had to correct myself. You can censor this in editing, right? But it's kind of an obvious thing, but it is one of the sort of drugs that are sort of not so much taboo, but sort of seen as slightly more wary around, and you need to be careful. If it does you physical harm, then it is one of those things that it makes you very highly advised that you go to rehabilitation, essentially. And already labor laws in Xentherida are very lax, so it's not like you would lose money having to go to a rehabilitation clinic because you've got time off work, for example. So it's meant to like keep things working, and especially with an old population and a very old population, every single worker matters. So they pumped a lot of money in, and this is also probably why we have probably a very large amount of debt. So what could possibly go wrong with spending? Just get money, lol. Yeah.
So here's a question that's been asked twice already by Gap. What is Xentherida's stance on communism?
It's been asked twice, so he doesn't deserve to hear. No. It's kind of seen as it's not actually outlawed, but it is viewed along the veins of fascism, as in it's an extreme ideology that has caused people a lot of harm, especially in Pridania, in Kogoria, in New Alaman, in other states that I don't know the name of that I cannot remember. It is kind of, it's not really outlawed essentially, but it is still seen as kind of, you're not going to be seen too well if you're marching down the streets going, kill all the bougies, Lamau. You're not going to be seen as, terribly convincing to the average person, unless there is some sort of incredible crisis, which I doubt. So, yeah, it's viewed along the same veins of fascism as a very extreme ideology that, in a stable country for a long time, isn't going to gain any traction, and probably won't, because I kind of don't want it to. So, essentially, yeah.
So, another pretty solid question from Robespierre. What if someone under the influence of a non-pharmaceutical drug were to commit a crime as a result of their addiction? Would they be imprisoned for the crime they committed under the influence, or would they not be punished at all because it was done as a result of their addiction, which is treated as a health-centric issue?
They would, at that point, if they had committed a crime, this isn't set in stone, so pretend I'm actually like reading this off like an actual cohesive script. Because they'd committed a crime, they would be sent to something like a prison. Xentheridan prisons are also very, very liberal because it's a focus on rehabilitation and getting people to stop reoffending in the first place. So if they committed a crime, they would be arrested, but it wouldn't be so much of a prison as it would just be a rehab clinic. If you were in such a desperate time to need to actually wait. No. This is contradictory with something else I've said as well. What I've said as well is, this is a long time ago, and the reaction to this wasn't terrific, but drugs in Xentherida aren't actually distributed by private dealers, essentially. Dealers have to sell onto the government, and the government checks for purity, they check for any health issues associated, and they will sell it from licensed dispensaries that are run by themselves, and you have to effective and because it's a monopoly, it is very difficult for private dealers to essentially carve out their own business, because they're also probably going to be seriously undercut by the government because they have infinite money. So if they had to commit a crime, so if they're under the influence committed a crime, then they would be sent to the prison for rehabilitation on drugs specifically. But if they were committing it so they could afford it, yeah, they would also probably be sent to the rehabilitation. But yes, there we go. I hope that made sense, because that didn't make any sense to me at all.
It makes enough sense.
Yeah, it's cohesive eventually.
So here's a question from Esp. He says, self-serving question, but what is Xentherida's view on social feudalism?
Xentherida's view is, what the hell is social feudalism? It doesn't. It just has no. It's one of those silly Icenian things. Ugh, shudder. Unless it's actually under Arundel, in which case I will kind of be regretting. I honestly don't know enough about social feudalism to actually have my country form an opinion on it. You would have to explain it to me quite a lot, and sort of historical view on whaling. Face the wall. That's your view on. That's my view on whaling. I hope you don't like living too long.
Jesus.
Oh, whale.
Which brings us to our next question. What is the current situation of Xentheride in foreign policy?
We're nuking any country that does whaling. That is all.
That's about the Yamantau response to it as well.
Yeah. Currently, the main thing we're focusing on is trying to get people to de-escalate. Even if this current age of warfare in Eris is unavoidable. So the past 2 years has been about 5 or 6 wars, at least breaking out on Eris. I can probably count them all, but again, I don't have a terrific memory. The sheer number of wars that's happened, there is no actual law to protect the people who are at risk. And Xentherida's incentive is to encourage a more stable world, effectively. And hell, if it can steal some refugees as well to send into the factories, that's even better, honestly. But as long as civilians and those who are vulnerable are protected, at least, and there is some sort of there is some sort of regulation state. Ooh, S. Ooh, M just went for a second. Are you all right, M?
Yeah, I was just having some technical difficulties where everyone cut out.
Okay, all right. It's Castor recording this, so effectively, by protecting those who are most at risk and minimizing bloodshed, Xentherida attempts to at least want to, stop some of the bloodshed, and maybe that might even stop reprisal attacks. So, for example, let's say after Dutrieka was shelled at Casada by a certain nation who didn't really give a monkeys about civilian casualties. They were just seen as reactive targets. That could have incentivized Dutrieka to just go all out on their terrorism and start gunning down Andrenian POWs. Yeah, you're not the one recording. Start gunning down POWs, eventually no mercy. And then that would just escalate the things further and further, probably to the point where Andren would just nuke. I mean, that's obviously not a serious take, but it just... An eye for an eye would make the whole world blind. This is a Xentheridan view to this. You need to protect those who are vulnerable, or else, what else is going to happen, really? More people are going to die. That's the Xentheridan view, with the wars, at least. So that was very rambly, even by my standards.
So, from Pred, kind of linking into that, what is Xentherida's opinion on the Northern Materan War?
How many guns do you want to buy? We have a lot. Do you want to buy some? That's my only opinion. Don't know, really. I guess we'd probably support Predice, but it's too bloody a war. We don't really want to support either side if they commit atrocities. We're kind of just going to be looking on, pleading to just stop smacking each other just repeatedly, but with automatic rifles. Also, you won't buy our stuff, so neither of you're both dead to us. So
it's quite the political stance.
Yeah, I'm only here to make money. That's about it. That's about it.
Fair enough. So, kind of moving to less serious points of
It was
debate.
serious.
Sure, nothing we do is serious. Nothing matters. It's fine. Oh, here's actually a question from Robespierre. What nation on Eris does Xentherida have the most disdain for?
It's you, the person listening. It's your nation. I have the most disdain for you. How dare you do whatever you did last Thursday? Honestly, there isn't really a sort of nation. I would probably say Asturica, Aden, New Alaman, Kaludgar, if that's still relevant, I guess. Because there's a war between them and Esplandia that I haven't heard from in a very long time. Sort of nations who are in like authoritarian nations who are trying to either prevent the will of the people or those who are starting bloodshed, effectively. The ones who are starting bloodshed are probably the main sort of people who would have the most disdain. So I'd probably honestly say at the moment New Alaman is who we have who we have the most disdain for, at least. We get along. I'd probably say Xentherida would get along with most countries in character. So, for example, there is meant to be a sort of cold war with the Bergen Pact and Syrixia's allies. We're trying to at least get along with them. We might not get along with Prytania so well after we bomb that school. But we're trying to at least keep somewhat neutrality between. At minimum, we want to keep neutrality. That probably helps by my own sort of inaction in Eris, sort of just observing and not really doing too much in character. But that's sort of lent an opportunity where we haven't actually established it being bad relations. So, the advantages of being lazy, they always work out.
Fair enough. Does Xentherida have a national sport?
This isn't now, but I used if anyone remembers really long time ago, if anyone remembers the player called Wolfsea, at one point he had something called the International Pan Fighting Tournament, where you would dress up in armor and smack each other with a pan. You'll probably know this. And I wanted to make that because I thought it was absolutely brilliant. I thought it was genuinely hilarious. And I wanted to have at least a bit of a chance in the competition because I wanted to stay in as long as I could. At one point, I had made pan fighting an actual national sport of Xentherida. But probably now, because I'm boring and unoriginal, it would probably be soccer. Or football, as I should be calling it. I just translated it for you international audiences. Mostly because it is kind of the... Got you. No, I just translate. This is for your benefit, Cap. Don't you dare say that you got me. I'm just very forgiving, I guess, of our colonial cousins. But yeah, it would probably be football. Either that or cricket, because that's my personal favorite sport, and my word is law. So, we're gonna answer Esp's question from like 5 minutes ago.
Oh.
What an awful question.
All right, here's a question from Esp. Boxers briefs.
I didn't expect you to actually ask that. Oh my
Welcome
god!
to the Thunderdome.
Nothing at all.
Oh.
I like to play. I like to live
Oh,
life.
nope.
Cut that. You can edit that out, right? You can edit that out, right?
Oh, God. No, that's staying in. You have to live with that.
Remember, if you don't acknowledge it, it doesn't exist. If you don't acknowledge it, it doesn't exist.
What's the inspiration? What's the inspiration for architecture in Xentherida?
Again, this is probably going to play more into the
Nordic.
No, it isn't actually Nordic. It's going to play into climate.
No.
Nope. I used to live on the eastern seaboard. Well, not actually eastern seaboard, but I used to live on the east coast of Australia. So my climate is essentially built around where I used to live. So it would be around the cities of Sydney to Brisbane, maybe up to Townsville, sort of temperate rainforest. And there is an actual architecture called Queenslander architecture that I do personally. So I can actually search. That is sort of the way that Xentherida houses are kind of meant to look. It is a bit confusing because we are a pretty densely packed nation, so we probably wouldn't have bungalows being as common. But effectively, yeah, something like Australian architecture, because that's definitely something that I'm familiar with, especially throughout my childhood. That's probably what the architecture would be, at least. Possibly also a mix of that and very British houses, again, because it sort of fits into the population density and how there's a massive bloody mountain range going through the middle of the country.
All right, fair enough. Question from Robespierre, going back to the monarchy.
Matriarchy.
You've said that. Same.
Women are queens.
Xentherida is matriarchal. Does this play into the predominant religious beliefs of the nation at all?
I have not really well built my religion at all. It is something very similar to animism, at least, for the belief in nature spirits. This is all, again, hypothetical. Yeah, Pax is going to be, yeah. We actually, I haven't world built any of this. Female spirits. No, the way I was planning to have it integrate, you're going to hear the word planning throughout this radio quite a lot. But the way I was planning to have it is that the women are the sort of an explanation as to why women are more special than men in Xentherida is the ability to give birth. So it would play into the idea of spirits and souls. And that photo's distracted me, Pax, I blame you. It would play into the idea of spirits, souls, and the fact that women are the ones who eventually give birth to children, or babies in this case. That would probably have the more religious sort of impact. So you would have any rituals or traditions would be carried out by women, for example, and almost exclusively. Yeah, you can't give birth. You could give birth to no one cares. People of Xentherida to men. It doesn't. I think you might be lacking on your thing right there. Historically, at least, historically in that case. But yeah, so essentially that was meant to play into the religious aspect of it. The fact that women are the ones who give souls, and they have the most important in all the religious aspects, and all the ones who are, oh, hello, Ark. They're all the ones who are the ones. They're the ones who are the ones. Thanks. They're the ones who carry out all the ceremonies, and the men are sort of sitting back, and they're the ones who are watching, as opposed to. So it would probably revolve a lot around birth, for example, for the religion. But again, this is all, like I've said, planning. So this is all fantastic.
Fair enough. I'm just going to sling some random world building crap at you in the few minutes we have left here. What is the most important book in Xentherida?
Kama Sutra. I would genuinely not know. I don't. That is definitely it wouldn't be the anarchist cookbook. I don't think there would really be a single more important cookbook. First of all, because sorry, I'm just looking at chat and I'm losing my mind.
Sorry, guys. It's just like the chat is full of jokes about weed. Weed books about weed.
Yeah. Probably because one, writing is a sin, and everything must be told by voice. Otherwise, Sun God himself, well, herself, would be very disappointed.
Right.
But no, I don't think there would be a single most important book, at least, especially not in religious aspects either, as well. Mostly because how the way everything was passed, less about writing and more about the ability to speak and deliver the spoken word. What's on the menu? If none of you ask if do Treka as well, that actually makes me sad. So forgotten. Is it because it's not a state?
It's because the duckies aren't real people and no one cares.
Wow, it's just, just racism.
That's canon on the radio.
No, it isn't.
So,
news.
A question from Robespierre. What is Xentherida's favorite delicacy?
Arse.
Zen.
I can't. I'm really derailing this interview massively. You're gonna have to like get that sensor noise out as quickly as you can. Honestly, probably the staple food would be wheat-based things, so there'd probably be an emphasis on bread. Bread, meat, especially cattle, would be probably a very big thing. Cattle, sheep, chicken would probably be the main 3 meals, at least. So a barbecue is very much a barbecue is a very traditional Xentheridan thing to have, especially on a hot day. Though I can't really relate currently living in the UK because a hot day relates to above 12 degrees Celsius. So a barbecue is very much a thing. Anything based on wheat, bread is an important aspect of Xentherida. So a traditional breakfast would probably shut up.
I'm sorry, guys. The chat is trying to get Zen to say his one of his 3 catchphrases. He's basically like an old school GI Joe. You pull the string, he says one of 3 interesting things. It's just
Can you ask me Pax's question a second? So a traditional Xentheridan breakfast would probably be more sort of toast, for example, toast, a sandwich, anything that goes onto bread, even. Beef is actually is a more breakfasty thing in Xentherida. For example, you would have a steak though. It would basically be something complementing bread, or more into the modern age, at least there would be wheat-based cereals. So Weetabix, I guess, or actually, as I should say, if it's Australian, it'd be more like wheat beaks. So yeah. Yeah. Also, I'm gonna steal your job for a second, Em. What do Xentheridans say when their friends' skills have issues? Well, they clearly say the most obvious things, and that's expertise problem. You suffer from expertise problem. I think I actually stopped Em for a second.
all right. Guys, I'm sorry, but we're gonna have to cut this one short.
You can't stop laughing.
Thank you for tuning in to the RP Spotlight on April 16th. It's been fantastic to have Zen on the show after such a long wait. Yeah. We will never have him on again.
I mean, I'm always up. I'll be an hour late this time instead of the usual 15 minutes. It's fashionably late. Fashionably late, that's what it is. Yeah. Thank you very much for having me on, Em. It's been lovely. Been lovely talking to you and rambling. I might actually need an oxygen canister after this. I might need an oxygen canister after this. I can't stop I can't stop talking. I need to mind my language.
All right, Casto, please stop the recording.
Stop it before I say something that'll actually just do me something terrible.